So that comes around to the question, how can we fix it? How much work do you need to do in order to get good improvements in water quality? And this comes from a bunch of, well, they're models, but they're models that work. They're not models like model airplanes or something, but these are built from a series of equations and experience in a whole bunch of different lakes. And what we've got here is sort of the current conditions. This is under the current phosphorus input rate. And this is then the estimates of changes in the environment if we reduce the amount of phosphorus in the water coming in from the watershed by a certain fraction. Okay, so this is a 20% reduction in the phosphorus coming in, and this shows us what, in this case, would be the sort of the predicted chlorophyll concentration. We're sitting up here for an average. We might want the water to be less green, so we want to reduce the phosphorus input by a certain fraction. Over here is something that most of you are probably a little bit more interested in. This is the Secchi transparency. So this is the clarity of the water in yards, 1, 2, 3 yards. Right now we're at about half a yard, foot and a half on average, something like that. And in order to get to what the Iowa State target is, the legislature's target, we need to effect a pretty major decrease in the input of phosphorus from the watershed. These are models that work. This is just the sort of a band of confidence that we have around it. And basically, in order to get to some of those targets of about 4.5 feet of water clarity, we need something like about a 75% reduction of phosphorus input. It seems like a lot, but there are ways of getting there, and they're good ways. So one way you can get there is by allowing the upstream wetlands, ponds, bays, and inlets to do their work. They can do the work that sort of nature designed them to do. The inlet area is now generating some of the phosphorus that's coming in, and usually those kinds of bays and inlets and wetland areas take up nutrients pretty effectively. The DNR and DU wetlands seem to be working a little better. They're pulling out about 4% of the overall phosphorus budget and sedimenting it out in those wetlands. But you can get some sense, when you're thinking about the amount of cubic yards of sediment coming from the watershed, they fill in pretty fast and probably could use some maintenance. So ways to reduce the phosphorus inputs by 75%, well, you can do this. You can try and keep it from leaving the land. There's nothing wrong with nutrients as long as they don't get into the water, because they're good for crop growth. You can also catch it and remove it before it gets down to the lake, and there are various possible ways to do it. And then, so the rest of what I'm going to say in the next couple minutes just has to do with some of the ideas, benefits, and approximate costs of getting to those levels of reduction. I just wanted actually to mention here once more the extreme value of the system. So when you see these numbers, we're talking millions of dollars of revenue that comes to communities and to the state of Iowa from these. And usually those revenues go up quite radically when the water quality gets better, and that's certainly what all the studies have shown us. And so basically it's worth the effort to do this kind of work. Sorry about the little print. I maybe should have expanded this a little bit. But this shows the kinds of ideas. There are lots of ideas out there. The question is it feasible to reduce phosphorus input by 75%? Sounds like a great big target. But there are several things that can be done. And this just shows what we can get from watershed surface cover management, various BMPs on the land. And these are estimates of what the community could maybe do in terms of reduction by changing watershed practices. And those reductions could be up into the neighborhood of 35%, depending on how much can actually get done out there. And that depends on community will and individual people and what can be changed. The costs can be fairly substantial, but when you think of the current value, annual value of $19 million per year and 400 jobs and the future with better water quality, it seems like fairly small numbers. There are also wetlands that one can work on to improve water quality once it moves downstream. And various combinations of changes in the watershed and wetland construction, improvement, maintenance, and so on, can give us another sort of bump of several percent, tens of percentages of reduction in phosphorus, all pushing us up toward that goal of about 75%. If one were to do some dredging in the inlet area and increase the depth by as little as, increase the mean water depth to about 3 feet, you could probably decrease the whole phosphorus input by about 64%. That's fairly encouraging. Problem is, if you don't do stuff in the watershed, it'll fill right back in again, and then you will have wasted that money. And remember, we're shoveling it in at 20,000 cubic yards per year, something like that, as we dredge it out. If you go even farther and make it even deeper out in the middle there, you can get up to something like 78%. So it's certainly feasible. And possible to do, depending on the will of the community and the combination that the communities and agencies work out together to make the system better. So the right blend of options is really, in my view, for the community to decide. Wasn't our job to suggest exactly what to do. Here are some options, and it is feasible. Potential implementation budgets can range from as little as $1.5 million to $10 million, and we need to be asking and answering questions like, what are our chances of 75% reduction of outputs from the upper or southern watershed? Pretty important issue. Will watershed residents be willing to undertake those cost-effective mitigation options? They're out there and they're available. What blend of engineering, like dredging and changes in hydraulics and so on, versus land management would be most acceptable and most cost-effective? These are the questions that I think that the community needs to think about and work out together as you look to a brighter future for this wonderful lake that's out there, the Black Hawk Lake, a fantastic system.